Hello and welcome. Today we are going to be exploring colors and lines inspired by Georgia O'Keeffe. This is an art activity. It's actually activity number 3, and you can find this in your Georgia O'Keeffe Modern Art Explorer Kit. And before we begin, I want to talk to you all about the supplies that we're going to be using. So make sure you grab your kit, grab these items out, but we're going to be using our watercolors, both of our brushes, the round and the flat. I also want you to grab the envelope in there and pull out the color tissue squares. These actually act just like watercolor, and I'll show you how we can use them later on in the activity. And then we're also going to be needing that watercolor paper. So the one that you have is bigger than this. This is just me folding it in half and doing a half size of it. I'm going to work a little bit smaller, but it's your choice. If you want to go small, great. If you want to go big, that is fine too. You can use the full sheet, but make sure you have that watercolor paper. And then there are a few things you will need that are not included. And that is a tub of water so that we can activate all of the colors. And this is nice to have, it's optional, but masking tape. And I like to use masking tape around the paper here. I'll show you. I like to use it here to make a little frame. And what's really nice is that when you're done with your artwork, you can actually peel this off and you'll have a nice little frame around your artwork. And also it helps keep the paper stable. So if you don't have this, not a big deal. It's just a nice to have. Work with your adults, see if they can find that for you. And then finally, we always like to talk about surface. We need a surface where we can play and experiment and stay curious. So we want it definitely something easy to clean, something that is suitable for paint. So make sure you actually check with your adult and make sure you're in a good space before we start painting. Now, I always talk about, I'm going to be doing the demo in a bake pan. This is just something really easy. Everyone should have. This is a nice surface that we can paint on. We can keep the watercolors and use it to move and do all kinds of fun things with that. If you have that, great. But yes, definitely work with your adult to find the right surface and the right place to do your painting. All right, we are ready to begin. So let's move all of our materials that we just gathered around us so that we can easily access them. Just going to push this off to the side. Before we start the art, it is important that we not only look at some artwork to inspire us, but it's also important that we have a curious mindset and we explore some questions to think about before we start to design and do our artwork. So real quick, I want you all to take a look at this painting by Georgia O'Keeffe. And when you're looking at it, I want you to look at how Georgia explored color and lines. Now, often you'll hear that Georgia painted nature in a way that showed how it made her feel. So there's emotions here. There's happy, sad, excitement. There's a level of emotion within this painting. And so I want you just to take a moment and observe that and see what stands out to you. And I want you to think about, how is this making you feel and how do you think Georgia felt when she was making it? So as we look at this, this is Georgia O'Keeffe Black Mesa Landscape. It was in New Mexico, and it says Outback of Maries 2. Now, this is actually an oil painting. It is not watercolor, but I wanted it to inspire us because the lines and textures and colors, I think, would be really fun to reimagine with watercolor. So I want you to also know that this is an artwork that you can see at the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum. So if you're ever in Santa Fe, New Mexico, there is a museum there, and it houses all of Georgia's work, and it's really a beautiful museum. So I highly recommend that you, if you're there, visit and check these out in person. But since we're at home, we can use this postcard here to reference the painting, get to know it, and then answer some of these questions. So I want you all to think about, what was your first reaction to this artwork? And then why did you have that reaction? Next, we're going to describe the colors in the artwork. What elements in this painting seem real? And in contrast, what elements seem dreamlike or imaginary? Take a moment there. get curious, explore questions. And then I want us to switch gears and do our art activity. So I'm going to keep this close because today we're going to use this as an inspiration. Now, whenever you're creating, your work is your work. So you can reimagine this. It doesn't have to look just like that. There's no right, there's no wrong way to do a painting. If you're having fun and you're making, that is all that is important. So we use this as an inspiration point, but please, if you want to explore lines and colors in different ways using your materials, I highly encourage that. Be experimental, be a risk taker, have fun. So you have the materials, you have everything you need. But for today's activity, I'm just going to keep this close. I'm going to actually push it off here. You won't see it any longer, but I want to just take a look at it as I draw. I'm also going to get my paper ready. So I already had the masking tape done, and I'm going to actually put it in my safe watercolor surface, which is just this bake pan. And I'm gonna kind of smash this in and then just push it down really hard and get that tape all nice and ready. All right, so now I have my working space. I have my canvas. Now, I have some materials here that we are going to use. So first, with this water, I'm going to get my brushes wet, and I'm going to think about, I'm going to show you some different ways to use these tissue squares. So right now I'm going to use my flat brush. I'm going to show you what it looks like when you apply them wet and dry. So over here, this is going to be wet. You can see I'm just painting my paper with water. I'm going really fast just to kind of cover this whole side over here on my left. And thinking about this image here, there is some interesting colors. And so I'm just going to kind of put some blues here, maybe some darker blues. Just kind of start to outline some of these colors that I'm seeing using these tissues. So these tissues are dry, the paper is wet, and just placing those on there. I'm inspired by looking at some of these colors here and thinking about how I could reinterpret this. So I'm just pulling out what I can. And then you can overlap these, you can push them down, you can keep them separated. Have fun and explore all the different variations here. I'm just kind of starting down to like think about scale and color and what I could create here. So I'm going to lay a few more of these down. Have some greens down here. And I'm really just using these as like a paint, inspired by paint. Like these are like little paint tissues that I'm just setting down. Now, if you were inspired to take these and do a different color scheme, please do that. Be a risk taker. Use your own perspective. Do whatever you need. But just for the sake of this demo, I'm going to show you. I'm going to keep this close. I'm actually, let's move this just so you can see more of this. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get my flat brush again, and I am going to hold these down and I'm going to dab. Now, you see that white got taken over by the blue, but that's okay. I still want to see what happens when I overlap these. I dab. Oop, you're getting a little bit of a hint of what to expect. There's some color transfer. And I'm just taking my finger to hold them down. I'm dabbing. Now this is the flat brush. Now maybe let's experiment, see what is different when I use this round brush. There's a lot more water coming out, especially when I dab this round brush. So I'm gonna just keep exploring this to see what happens. Now, think about these dry. What happens when you're adding more water? Is the color going to transfer more, do you think? Transfer less? I'm gonna just go and see how much water I can actually put on these, and then I'm gonna give it just a moment. So I'm gonna let those tissue squares just stay right there. At this point, it could be really fun to just really do this whole landscape. And you could take all of your tissue squares and you can really have fun here. And maybe you're adding some new colors, like maybe there's some purples and maybe we get a little darker here, or maybe we're adding the purples on top of the browns. What's happening when these colors are coming together? So as I place more down, I'm just going to dab these, and there's that white again, kind of absorbing some more of that color. Now, we originally did this pretty wet and then dry color tissues. Now I'm going to do some dry. I'm going to keep this dry and just show you some ways you can do the color tissue. You can do them completely dry and just use the water to paint them down. All right, so that's one way you can do it. So this is just dry, and then I'm just taking some water and I am painting. So we'll go there, kind of move these around a bit. Actually, I really want to keep that green down here. All right, so, and then also you can see I can actually paint using these tissue squares. There's a few things you could do. You could cover this whole thing with tissue squares and just keep going. For the demo, I'm not going to do that. I'm actually going to keep some of my tissues because there's another activity in this kit where you can use these. It's Explore Abstraction. And so yes, if you do want to use all of them, great. But if you can keep just a few, there's a really fun Explore Abstraction activity where you can use these. So I'm going to pretend that I've covered all of this, letting these sit for just a bit. Now, there are still our watercolor pan set that we have here. And we also have our watercolor crayon. So this, right now we're exploring colors. The next step is we're going to explore lines. So getting ready for the line exploration, I am gonna just see, let's see, I see some water here. I'm just gonna kind of move this around. I really like movement and watercolor. And then I'm gonna start to pick these up. And I'm just gonna see what happens here. So you can pick these up. And now these are all blue. And so something I like to do is you can take these and make some textures. Now I know in the painting it's actually very smooth, and so we can kind of smooth this out and just kind of spread it around. We have this one here, that lighter color. So take that, and then we can take some of these darker colors and just see what happens here. And same thing, as you can kind of grab these and really add texture. You can smooth, you can paint with them, just get really messy, really dirty. And I'm just going to take this last one and I'm just going to pick these all up and see what happens. So at this point, we have a really nice base of color transfer from the color tissue. So if you wanted just to only do water tissue, that's great. I do want to show you just how we can achieve some of these lines here with the watercolor crayons. So we've talked about these in some other videos, but the watercolor crayons are magic because they're just like crayons, right? Except they want to act like watercolor when they're wet. And so as you can see here, this is where you can have fun making lines and marks for the first time. And with these, there's a few ways to make marks. So of course, with traditional crayons, we're just holding them and we're making marks, right? We might even be holding them with a fist. You can also hold them, this is a little bit finer motor skill. So you can just grab your fist, you can grab them here, whatever's most comfortable for you, and you can start to make lines. And these lines can be close to the painting, or it can just be how you want to explore. And so here, I am just really wanting to make lines and see how I can do that. Now, another way you can do this, and I've done this a little bit, actually I'm gonna grab this one. This one broke, but you can see here that now I can take it and I can hold it and I can just really explore a thicker line. And what happens when I start to do this thicker line here? And so this is a nice way to use those. And then finally, you can just use a little bit and you can make a really, really fine point. Like if you wanted to just shade this in. Just use that very top of the crayon and you can start to make these lines. Now, what's nice about this paper already being pretty wet is I'm getting a really nice transfer of this crayon, but it has a kind of a waxy feel. And what I might even do more is just kind of spread this out and add some more water. Because when I'm adding water to these crayons, the lines you can start to see stay, but I still get a little bit of that transfer of color. And so here, I'm gonna actually explore both my round and my flat brush, but I think I'd like to just focus on trying to make these. And so again, you can kind of stop and add the watercolor. You could just really focus on the lines here. So right here, I really just want to pull in this. And this is that side technique where I'm really just pushing it and I'm making some triangles. You can just simplify this with some triangles. It gets a lot darker, especially in that middle, and paying attention to the colors here. And the lines and how colors affect lines. And I'm gonna grab this really dark purple, maybe I'll do black. And just really pull in that color difference here. And I just kind of pull this in. And so here, this is where you have fun and you can make lines. Oh, there's a tissue color. There's a tissue square there. I'm gonna leave it. I'm just gonna see what happens. I'm gonna just leave that right there. I'm gonna push this through a bit. One of the things that really stood out to me was the green, and I love how the water has kind of started to pool at the bottom here, but I do wanna add just some quick lines. And so I'm gonna just use the sides, and I'm gonna maybe just explore some of this water crayon down here and add a layer on top of the color tissue paper that we had. And then I'm gonna just add maybe a little bit more lines here. I really want to think about these lines. All right, so at that point, we have now some fun things to do. So I'm gonna take this flat brush and I'm gonna just kind of blend this and blur these lines a little bit more so that this really starts to feel like the green nature. And I'm doing a circular flat brush. I'm adding a lot of water. And then I'm also gonna take the same flat brush, rinse it off, and I'm gonna paint the lines that I just made and see what happens. I'm gonna actually paint them the same way I made the lines and just see how the colors blend. And I'm gonna take my round brush and I'm gonna just kind of pull in these lines a little bit more and see how much transfer I can get here. And so you're just kind of pulling all of these together at this point. Now I have a nice outline. I actually at this point too could really go back and add these color tissues. So maybe I'm wanting to bring out or just see what happens. I'm going to experiment here and just add some color tissues. And sometimes what I'll do is I'll just overlap them and then that's a little dirty water and that can happen. So I'm just going to wring that out one more time. I'm going to try and keep it. And so what I'm doing here is I'm just dabbing. I'm just dabbing those watercolor tissues. All right, so there's a lot. I could still keep going. I could start to add more layers and layers of color, but I just want to show you with these color tissues and the lines and all the water, you can start to see some really fun things that start to happen at the sky. I also always encourage movement. And so it's like, oh, is there any way that is the water wanting to move this painting? Right now it's not, but if you have a lot of water pulled in areas, sometimes that will pull colors down. And then I'm really trying to just see what it's like to take these tissues and add on top. And it looks like actually there's a lot more color here. So I'm gonna just take those up, pick them up, and I'm gonna add more color and see if I can even transfer more here to really get that vibrancy in the middle. So anyway, there's a lot of techniques that we went over. We went over how could we use these color tissue papers. So there's different ways you can do them dry and wet, and you can paint on top of them, you can overlap them. We also explored different ways to make marks with a crayon, a watercolor crayon. So I want you to have fun and make marks all over and explore, and then take those same marks and mimic them using your watercolor and just seeing what happens and how all the colors blend. Now, you should have everything you need to make this activity at home. I'm going to just pull these tissues off. Now, you can keep these on. Sometimes I've kept the color paper on so that it has a texture and it's really fun. Let's see what happens when I take this one off. Yeah, let's take that one off. Sometimes it's nice. They will eventually fall off when they dry. So if you wanted to keep them on, after everything's dry, you can glue them. And then that way you could even just add some dimension. Like we could keep these and just almost let them, I can show you. So you can almost keep these at the bottom and it can create a texture. I'm just gonna grab some others here. And then as they dry, they will come off, but you could almost just re-glue them when they're not wet, and you can add a whole different layer of depth to this. So I've done that before and I've enjoyed the results. So anyway, you have everything you need. So please have fun, experiment, explore, use all your materials, and I look forward to seeing you with new activities that we do. So take care and talk to you soon.